Marcus Chen shuffled through the corridors of the Galactic Defense Station Omega-7, his maintenance uniform wrinkled and stained with grease. The other species barely acknowledged his presence as he pushed his repair cart past towering Zilithians with their crystalline exoskeletons, graceful Vorthak whose tentacles moved like liquid mercury, and the imposing Kraxan warriors whose scales gleamed under the artificial lighting. To them, Marcus was just another human, the weakest species in the known galaxy. A cosmic joke that had somehow stumbled into space travel despite lacking any remarkable abilities. No natural armor, no telepathic powers, no enhanced strength or speed, just soft, pink flesh that bruised easily and a lifespan that was considered pitifully short by galactic standards. "Watch where you're going," meatbag, growled Commander Thok, a massive Kraxan whose red scales indicated his high military rank. Marcus stumbled backward as the alien's powerful arm swept across his path, nearly knocking over his cart of tools. "Sorry, sir," Marcus mumbled, keeping his eyes down. He had learned long ago that direct eye contact was considered a challenge by most species, and challenges from humans were seen as either insulting or amusing. The command center of Omega-7 hummed with activity. This was one of the most important defensive positions in the Outer Rim, monitoring the border between civilized space and the dreaded void sectors. For 3 years, Marcus had worked here as a low-level maintenance technician, fixing air recyclers, repairing damaged panels, and performing the menial tasks that kept the station running. Admiral Zexhai, an elegant Vorthak with silver tentacles that marked her as nobility, glided past without so much as a glance in Marcus's direction. Her telepathic conversation with her staff created a soft humming in the air that made Marcus's teeth ache. Humans were one of the few species completely immune to telepathy, which the other races found both disturbing and primitive. "The biological surveys from Sector 7 are complete," announced Lieutenant Korv, a young Zilithian whose crystal formations pulsed with nervous blue light. "No signs of the Reaper incursions, but the energy readings are unusual." Marcus paused in his work, listening despite himself. The Reapers were the stuff of nightmares in this part of the galaxy, ancient machines from beyond known space that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing but dead rock behind. They had appeared without warning 6 months ago, striking 3 colonies before vanishing back into the void sectors. Unusual how? Admiral Zexhai's mental voice carried clearly through the command center, translated into audible speech by the station's computers for the benefit of the few non-telepathic species present. The quantum signatures suggest massive energy buildup, but no visible source. It's as if something is drawing power from subspace itself. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard rumors from other human workers on distant stations, stories of entire fleets disappearing, of worlds stripped bare in hours, of the few survivors babbling about machines that defied all known physics. Commander Thok slammed his scaled fist against a console, causing several smaller aliens to scatter. "Coward talk! The Reapers are just another enemy to be crushed. The Kraxan Empire has never known defeat." The Admiral's tentacles rippled with what Marcus recognized as mild amusement. "Your confidence is admirable, Commander. However, the reports from the lost colonies suggest we may be facing something beyond conventional military response." "Bah!" Thok's translator couldn't quite capture the disdain in his growling voice. "What could machines do that flesh and blood cannot overcome? We have the finest warriors in the galaxy, weapons that can crack planets, and minds sharp enough to outthink any artificial intelligence." Marcus continued his work, invisible and ignored as the debate continued around him. That was the thing about being human in galactic society. They were so thoroughly dismissed that they became like furniture, present but not worth noticing. It had advantages, though. Over 3 years, Marcus had heard countless conversations, learned about technologies and strategies that were supposedly classified, and gained an understanding of galactic politics that few humans possessed. His personal communicator buzzed softly, a message from his sister Sarah on Earth, probably complaining about her job at the agricultural collective or asking when he was coming home for a visit. Marcus tucked the device away without reading it. Earth seemed like a distant dream now, a quiet blue world where humans still believed they might someday earn respect among the stars. The main display screen flickered to life, showing a tactical map of the local sector. Red warning indicators were spreading across several systems like an infection. Marcus felt his blood turn cold as he recognized the pattern. "Admiral?" Lieutenant Korv's crystal formations were now flashing urgent orange. "We're receiving emergency transmissions from the Helix colony. They're under attack." The command center erupted into controlled chaos. Officers rushed to their stations while display screens filled with incoming data. Admiral Zexhi's tentacles moved in complex patterns as she processed multiple information streams simultaneously. "Show me," she commanded. The main screen filled with a live transmission from Helix Colony. The image was grainy and filled with static, but Marcus could see enough to understand why his hands had started trembling. Massive metallic shapes moved across a burning landscape like geometric storms. They didn't look like any ships he had ever seen, but rather like mathematical concepts given physical form. Perfect spheres that somehow existed in too many dimensions, creating an optical illusion that hurt to look at directly. The transmission cut to an emergency bunker where panicked colonists huddled in terror. A human voice, distorted by fear and interference, came through the speakers. "Please, anyone listening, they came out of nowhere. Our defense fleet just stopped working. The ships are still intact, but nothing responds. The crews are alive, but they can't move, can't think. It's like the machines are draining something from them. We've lost contact with the surface. If anyone can hear this..." The transmission ended in static. Commander Thok was already bellowing orders to his tactical staff. "Prepare the war fleet. All ships to battle stations. We'll show these machines what happens when they threaten Kraxan territory." Admiral Zexhi remained calm, her silver tentacles barely moving as she considered their options. "Commander, our reports suggest conventional weapons may be ineffective. Perhaps we should contact the inner worlds for guidance." "Guidance?" Thok's scales rippled with rage. "While innocents die? No, we are warriors. We act." Marcus watched the arguments unfold with growing dread. He had read the classified reports that crossed his workstation's computer terminals. The Reapers weren't just another hostile alien species. They were something else entirely. Something that treated the laws of physics as mere suggestions and consumed the life force of entire worlds. But more importantly, Marcus knew something that none of the commanding officers suspected. Hidden in his modest quarters was a piece of technology that shouldn't exist. A device his grandfather had left him with a warning to keep it secret until the day when humanity's survival depended on it. That day might be coming sooner than anyone imagined. The tactical display updated again, showing the Reaper fleet's projected course. Marcus felt his stomach drop as he realized the truth. Helix Colony wasn't their real target. It was just the first step, the energy readings, the strange quantum signatures, the systematic attack pattern. It all pointed to one conclusion. The Reapers were heading for Earth, and they would pass through Omega-7 to get there. Marcus quietly finished his maintenance tasks and began pushing his cart toward the exit. None of the arguing officers paid him any attention as he slipped away from the command center. In approximately 6 hours, the most powerful defense station in this sector would face an enemy that had already destroyed everything sent against it. But Marcus Chen, the ignored human maintenance worker, might be the only person in the galaxy who had a chance to stop them. He just had to hope that his grandfather's final gift was everything the old man had claimed it to be. Marcus's quarters were cramped and located in the least desirable section of Omega-7, near the waste recycling systems where the constant humming of machinery made sleep difficult. It was exactly the kind of accommodations that humans were assigned throughout galactic society, functional but clearly marking their low status. He sealed the door behind him and activated his personal privacy shield, a basic device that would prevent most scanning equipment from detecting what happened inside his room. His hands shook slightly as he moved to the far wall and pressed a hidden panel. A small compartment opened, revealing the object that had haunted his dreams for the past 5 years. The device was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. About the size of a book, it appeared to be made from some kind of metal that shifted between silver and deep black, depending on the angle of light. Strange symbols covered its surface, symbols that seemed to move when Marcus wasn't looking directly at them. The whole thing hummed with barely contained energy that made his teeth ache. His grandfather's words echoed in his memory. "This came to Earth before we ever reached the stars, Marcus. Found buried in Antarctica, deeper than any human civilization has ever existed. The scientists couldn't explain it, couldn't even properly scan it, but I was there the day they figured out what it responds to." Marcus placed his palm against the device's surface. Immediately, the symbols began to glow with soft blue light, and the humming intensified. A warm sensation spread up his arm, and suddenly his mind was filled with information that shouldn't exist. Technical specifications for weapons that could reshape reality, engineering principles that violated everything known about physics, and most importantly, the true history of the Reapers and why they had come to this galaxy. The device was called a Consciousness Interface Unit, and it had been left on Earth by the last survivors of an ancient war. The Reapers weren't machines at all. They were something far worse, the preserved consciousness of a species that had discovered how to transfer their minds into quantum constructs, making them effectively immortal, but requiring them to consume the life energy of other beings to maintain their existence. They had been dormant in the void sectors for millions of years, waiting until the galaxy had developed enough intelligent life to provide a worthy harvest. The appearance of spacefaring civilizations had awakened them, and now they were moving systematically through the galaxy, draining the life force from entire worlds to fuel their continued existence. But the ancient civilization that had fought them before had prepared for their return. They had hidden devices throughout the galaxy, weapons specifically designed to disrupt the quantum matrices that held the Reapers together. The problem was that these weapons required a specific type of consciousness to operate, one that was completely immune to telepathic influence and possessed what the ancients called chaotic creativity. Humans were the only known species with both qualities. Marcus felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. The device was more than just a weapon. It was a responsibility that his species had inherited without even knowing it, and right now, he was possibly the only human in position to use it. The station's emergency alarms suddenly began blaring throughout the corridors. Marcus's personal communicator crackled to life with Admiral Zexhi's voice. "All personnel to emergency stations. Long-range sensors have detected multiple contacts approaching at impossible velocities. All military personnel prepare for combat operations." Marcus grabbed his maintenance uniform and quickly changed into it. If he was going to save the station, he needed to get to the central computer core without attracting attention. The Consciousness Interface Unit would need to be connected directly to Omega-7's primary systems to have any chance of affecting the approaching Reapers. The corridors were chaos as various species rushed to their assigned positions. Kraxan warriors stomped past in their powered armor, weapon systems charging with distinctive whining sounds. Vorthak technicians floated through the passages, their tentacles dancing over portable control interfaces as they coordinated defensive systems. Zilithian engineers scurried toward critical stations, their crystalline forms reflecting the red emergency lighting. Marcus pushed his cart through the confusion, invisible as always. 3 years of maintenance work had given him access codes to areas that most species couldn't enter, and his human status meant that security systems barely registered his presence. The irony wasn't lost on him that the galaxy's dismissal of humanity might be the only thing that could save it. The central computer core was located deep within the station's most protected area. Massive quantum processing units hummed behind force barriers while data streams flowed like rivers of light through crystalline conduits. This was the brain of Omega-7, controlling everything from life support to the massive defensive weapons that had never been tested against a real threat. Marcus began connecting the interface unit to the primary data port, using maintenance protocols to mask his actions as routine system updates. The ancient device seemed eager to establish the connection, its symbols glowing brighter as it synchronized with the station's computers. Immediately, Marcus felt his consciousness expand beyond his physical body. He could sense every system on the station, feel the flow of power through thousands of circuits, and monitor the thoughts of every telepathic being aboard. But more importantly, he could detect the approaching Reapers with a clarity that terrified him. They weren't ships in any conventional sense. They were massive quantum entities held together by the collective will of billions of absorbed consciousnesses. Each Reaper contained the minds of entire civilizations, their individuality stripped away and converted into raw, computational power. They moved through space by manipulating the fabric of reality itself, making conventional physics irrelevant. And they were less than an hour away. Marcus accessed the station's communication systems and tried to contact the command center. Admiral Zexhi's voice came through clearly, but he could hear the strain of coordinating multiple defensive preparations. "Admiral, this is Maintenance Tech Chen. I need to speak with you immediately about the approaching threat." There was a long pause before her response came, tinged with telepathic irritation. "Maintenance personnel should remain at their assigned stations. We have no time for civilian concerns." "Admiral, please listen to me. The Reapers aren't what you think they are. Conventional weapons won't work against them. I have information that could save everyone on this station." Another pause, followed by Commander Thok's harsh voice cutting through the channel. "Human maintenance worker thinks he knows more than trained military officers? Get back to fixing pipes and leave warfare to your betters." Marcus felt a surge of frustration that was amplified by his connection to the interface unit. Around him, the computer core's displays flickered as quantum energy bled through the connection. He forced himself to remain calm, knowing that losing control now could damage systems that the station desperately needed. Instead, he focused on the approaching threat. Through the enhanced sensors provided by the interface unit, he could see the Reapers more clearly than anyone else on the station. 5 massive entities approaching in perfect formation, their quantum signatures creating distortions in space-time itself. They weren't just coming to attack Omega-7, they were coming to harvest it. Every living being on the station would have their consciousness stripped away and added to the Reaper's collective mind. Thousands of individual thoughts, memories, and dreams would be processed into raw computational power. The knowledge and experience of dozens of species would become fuel for entities that had long ago forgotten what it meant to be truly alive. Marcus made his decision. If the command staff wouldn't listen to warnings, he would have to take action on his own. The interface unit had given him access to systems that even Admiral Zexhi couldn't reach. He could feel the station's massive defensive weapons like extensions of his own body, along with experimental systems that had been installed but never activated. But first, he needed to understand exactly what he was fighting. Marcus opened his consciousness fully to the interface unit, allowing the ancient device to share everything it knew about the Reapers. The information flooded into his mind like a data tsunami, threatening to overwhelm his human brain with concepts that had been developed by civilizations millions of years more advanced than anything in the current galaxy. What he learned changed everything he thought he knew about the war that was about to begin. The knowledge flowing from the interface unit was staggering. Marcus learned that the Reapers had once been called the Nethys, a proud civilization that had achieved perfect technological harmony over 2 million years ago. They had solved death itself by transferring their consciousness into quantum matrices that could exist indefinitely. But immortality had come with a terrible price. The quantum matrices required constant energy to maintain coherence, and the only suitable fuel was the bioelectric patterns generated by living consciousness. At first, the Nethys had been content to harvest lower life forms, telling themselves they were simply using resources efficiently. But as their population grew and their energy needs increased, they began targeting more complex species. Eventually, they discovered that the consciousness of sapient beings provided exponentially more energy than simple animal minds. The first harvest of an intelligent species had been intended as a temporary measure to address an energy crisis. But the rush of power from absorbing millions of complex minds had proven addictive beyond their capacity to resist. Within 1,000 years, the Nethys had consumed every other intelligent species in their galaxy. But instead of satisfying their hunger, this only increased their need for more sophisticated consciousness to maintain their ever-growing collective mind. They became the Reapers, quantum entities driven by an insatiable need to harvest the thoughts and dreams of living beings. Marcus felt sick as he absorbed this information. The approaching entities weren't evil in any conventional sense. They were addicts driven by a hunger that could never be satisfied, forever seeking the next harvest to fuel their artificial existence. They had consumed hundreds of galaxies over millions of years, leaving behind nothing but empty space filled with the quantum echoes of extinct civilizations. But the interface unit also contained hope. The last civilization to face the Reapers had been called the Architects, and they had discovered the quantum entity's greatest weakness. The Reapers maintained their coherence through perfect mental harmony, millions of absorbed consciousnesses functioning as a single unified mind. Introduce enough chaos into that system, and the entire matrix would collapse. The problem was generating the right kind of chaos. Most intelligent species developed telepathic abilities as part of their natural evolution, creating minds that were fundamentally orderly and predictable. Only a few rare species remained completely immune to telepathic influence, maintaining the chaotic creativity needed to disrupt the Reaper's quantum matrices. Humans were one of those species, and Marcus, connected to the interface unit and integrated with Omega-7's computer systems, might be powerful enough to affect all 5 approaching Reapers simultaneously. The station shuddered as something massive impacted the outer defensive barriers. Through his expanded consciousness, Marcus could feel the Reapers beginning their attack. They weren't using conventional weapons. Instead, they were projecting fields that disrupted the quantum foundations of matter itself, slowly unraveling the station's structure at the subatomic level. In the command center, Admiral Zexhi's telepathic coordination was beginning to falter as the Reaper fields interfered with her mental connections. Commander Thok's weapons were firing continuously, but the energy beams passed harmlessly through the quantum entities without causing any damage. The Kraxan warriors' roars of frustration echoed through the corridors as their most powerful attacks proved completely ineffective. Marcus accessed the station's internal communications and broadcast on all channels. All personnel, this is Marcus Chen. The Reapers are quantum entities that feed on living consciousness. Conventional weapons cannot harm them. I repeat, do not engage with standard military protocols. The response was immediate and predictable. Commander Thok's voice came back filled with rage. Insignificant human! You have no authority here. Security, arrest this maintenance worker for interfering with military operations. But Admiral Zexhi's response was more thoughtful. Her telepathic abilities were allowing her to sense something that the others couldn't perceive. Wait. How does he know details about the entities that our sensors cannot detect? Marcus felt the station shudder again as another wave of quantum disruption washed over them. Systems throughout Omega-7 were beginning to fail as the Reaper's fields affected the electronic components. He was running out of time to convince the command staff, and soon it wouldn't matter whether they believed him or not. Admiral, I'm connected to technology that was left by the last civilization to fight the Reapers. They're not machines. They're the uploaded consciousness of an extinct species that survives by harvesting living minds. They've already consumed hundreds of galaxies and they're heading for Earth next. Through his connection to the station's sensors, Marcus could see the Reapers more clearly than anyone else aboard. They were beautiful in a terrible way, geometric forms that existed partially outside normal space-time. But their quantum signatures revealed the true horror. Each entity contained billions of individual consciousness patterns, the uploaded minds of entire civilizations compressed into computational matrices. Commander Thok's security team was approaching the computer core, their heavy footsteps echoing through the corridors. Marcus knew he had perhaps minutes before they arrived and disconnected him from the interface unit. Once that happened, the station would be defenseless against the approaching harvest. Admiral, please listen to me. The only way to stop them is to introduce chaotic patterns into their quantum matrices. Human consciousness is naturally immune to their absorption techniques, and I can use that immunity to disrupt their collective minds. But I need you to trust me and keep your security teams away from the computer core. The station's lights flickered as another quantum wave passed through them. Marcus could feel systems failing throughout Omega-7, as the Reaper's presence began affecting the fundamental structure of matter in the area. Life support was becoming unreliable, gravity generators were fluctuating, and the massive defensive weapons were powering down as their control circuits dissolved. Admiral Zexhi's telepathic voice came through the communications with unusual intensity. I can sense something in your mind, human. Patterns that should not exist in any natural consciousness. What exactly are you connected to? Marcus decided that complete honesty was his only remaining option. It's called a consciousness interface unit. It was left on Earth by an ancient civilization specifically to fight the Reapers. My species was chosen because we're immune to telepathic influence and possess chaotic creativity. We're the only beings in the galaxy who can generate the quantum disruption needed to collapse their matrices. Commander Thok's voice boomed through the station. Lies! Human delusions of grandeur! No species could be more important than the Kraxan Empire! But Admiral Zexhi was already using her command codes to lock down the security teams. Commander, hold your position. I want to see what this human can do. Through the interface unit, Marcus felt the first Reaper beginning its consciousness harvesting process. The entity was extending quantum tendrils throughout the station, seeking individual minds to absorb. Most of the crew would feel a moment of euphoria as their consciousness was pulled into the collective matrix, their individual thoughts becoming part of something infinitely larger. Marcus opened his mind completely to the interface unit and began the most dangerous gamble in human history. Instead of resisting the Reaper's harvesting tendrils, he allowed them to make contact with his consciousness. But instead of the orderly, predictable thoughts that the entity expected to find, it encountered the chaotic creativity that made human minds unique in the galaxy. The effect was immediate and devastating. Marcus's consciousness hit the Reaper's quantum matrix like a virus, spreading chaotic patterns through the carefully ordered collective mind. Billions of absorbed consciousnesses suddenly began asserting their individual identities, fighting against the harmonious unity that held the entity together. The first Reaper's scream was audible across multiple dimensions as its quantum coherence began to collapse. But the victory came with a terrible price. Marcus felt pieces of his own mind being torn away as he fought against an entity that contained the mental power of entire civilizations. He was winning, but the battle was destroying him in the process, and there were still 4 more Reapers approaching the station. Pain beyond description tore through Marcus's consciousness as he battled the first Reaper. It was like trying to arm wrestle a star while having his thoughts dissected by surgical lightning. But the chaos he was generating within the entity's quantum matrix was working. The carefully ordered collective mind that had once been the Nethys civilization was fragmenting into billions of individual voices, each one demanding recognition and autonomy. Through the station's sensors, Marcus could see the physical manifestation of the Reaper's collapse. The geometric perfection of its form was becoming unstable, reality distortions rippling outward as its quantum coherence failed. But even as it died, the entity was fighting back with everything it had learned from consuming countless civilizations. "What is happening?" Admiral Zexhi's telepathic voice was filled with awe and terror as she watched impossible displays of power through the station's viewports. Marcus forced himself to speak through the agony of mental combat. "The Reaper is dying, but it's taking parts of my mind with it. I can't maintain this level of chaos much longer." Commander Thok's security forces had reached the computer core, but they stopped in amazement at what they saw. Marcus was still connected to the interface unit, but his body was convulsing as electrical energy arced between him and the ancient device. The quantum feedback was literally rewriting his nervous system in real time, adapting his human brain to process computational loads that should have been impossible. The first Reaper finally collapsed completely, its quantum matrix dissolving into harmless energy that dissipated into the cosmic background radiation. But the victory had cost Marcus dearly. He could feel gaps in his memory where pieces of his consciousness had been torn away during the battle. Worse, he could sense the other 4 Reapers adapting to his attack, modifying their quantum structures to resist chaotic intrusion. "One down," Marcus gasped, blood trickling from his nose as his enhanced brain struggled with the strain. "But the others are learning from what just happened. They won't be as vulnerable to the same attack." Admiral Zexhi's tentacles were moving in complex patterns as she processed the implications of what she had witnessed. "How is this possible? Our science indicates that no biological consciousness should be capable of affecting quantum matrices directly." Through the interface unit, Marcus could access information that had been hidden from galactic civilization for millions of years. Human consciousness isn't entirely biological. We evolved on a world that was seeded with quantum fragments from the last war against the Reapers. Our brains developed along patterns that incorporate quantum processing elements. That's why we're immune to telepathy and why we can generate chaos that disrupts their matrices. The second Reaper was approaching more cautiously now, its quantum tendrils probing the station's defenses without making direct contact. Marcus could feel its alien intelligence analyzing the destruction of its companion, searching for weaknesses in his chaotic attack patterns. But Marcus had learned something crucial during the first battle. The interface unit wasn't just amplifying his natural abilities. It was teaching him how to weaponize aspects of human consciousness that his species had never understood. The chaotic creativity that made humans unpredictable also made them capable of rewriting reality at the quantum level. "Commander Thok," Marcus called out, his voice strained but determined. "I need you to do something that goes against every warrior instinct you have. I need you to order all military personnel to stop thinking about tactical responses." The Kraxan warrior's scales rippled with confusion and anger. "What kind of nonsense is this? You want us to stop thinking during combat?" "The Reapers are learning from our predictable military responses. Every tactical analysis, every strategic planning session, every weapons calculation is giving them data they can use to adapt their defenses. I need them to encounter something completely unpredictable." Admiral Zexhi understood immediately, her advanced telepathic abilities allowing her to perceive the quantum patterns that Marcus was describing. "He's right. The entities are processing our logical responses and using them to strengthen their matrices. We need to create genuine chaos." The second Reaper struck without warning, but instead of using the harvesting technique that had failed against Marcus, it projected a quantum weapon that began unraveling the station's hull at the molecular level. Sections of Omega-7 simply ceased to exist as the weapon erased matter from reality itself. Marcus felt the station dying around him and made a desperate decision. Instead of trying to fight the Reaper directly, he opened his consciousness to every person aboard Omega-7. Through the interface unit, he shared fragments of human memory and experience with thousands of alien minds. The effect was immediate and profound. Kraxan warriors suddenly found themselves experiencing human emotions like wonder and curiosity instead of their natural aggression. Vorthak telepaths were flooded with human concepts of individualism that disrupted their collective thinking patterns. Zilithian engineers began approaching problems with intuitive leaps instead of logical progression. The chaos was beautiful and terrifying. Across the station, aliens began acting in ways that their own species found incomprehensible, and that chaos spread outward like a wave, carried by telepathic connections and quantum entanglement to the approaching Reapers. The second Reaper recoiled as if it had been struck by physical force. Its quantum matrix, adapted to process orderly alien thoughts, couldn't handle the flood of chaotic human experiences being broadcast by thousands of temporarily altered minds. The entity's careful adaptations became liabilities as it tried to absorb thought patterns that violated every principle of logical consciousness. But the feedback was destroying Marcus. Sharing human consciousness with so many alien minds was like trying to pour an ocean through a straw. He felt his sense of self fragmenting as pieces of his identity were distributed among the crew of Omega-7. "Marcus!" Admiral Zexhi's mental voice cut through the chaos with surprising warmth. "You're losing cohesion! Pull back before you dissolve completely!" Instead, Marcus pushed harder. Through the interface unit, he could see the underlying quantum structure of reality itself. The Reapers weren't just entities within the universe, they were infections in the fabric of space-time, spreading their ordered perfection like a disease that consumed creativity and spontaneity. But human consciousness was the antidote, not because humans were naturally superior, but because they had evolved in contact with quantum fragments left by previous civilizations that had fought this same war. Humanity was the galaxy's immune system, designed specifically to combat the Reaper infection. The revelation gave Marcus the strength to make one final push. He reached out with his consciousness to touch all 5 remaining Reapers simultaneously, sharing with them the most chaotic and beautiful aspects of human experience. Memories of childhood laughter, the pain of lost love, the wonder of discovering something new, the defiant hope that persisted even in the face of impossible odds. The Reapers screamed in harmonics that shattered crystal formations throughout the station. Their perfect quantum matrices couldn't process concepts like hope without logic, love without benefit, or creativity without purpose. These uniquely human experiences were like viruses in their collective consciousness, spreading chaos through minds that had forgotten what it meant to be truly alive. One by one, the ancient entities collapsed as their quantum coherence failed. Millions of years of accumulated consciousness dissolved back into the cosmic background radiation, finally achieving the peace that the original Nethys civilization had been seeking when they first uploaded their minds. Marcus felt his own consciousness scattering as the effort overwhelmed his human brain. But as he began to fade, he felt something unexpected. The interface unit wasn't just taking his thoughts, it was giving something back. The preserved knowledge of every civilization that had ever fought the Reapers was flowing into him, along with the collective gratitude of species that had been saved by sacrifices similar to his own. He wasn't dying. He was becoming something new. When Marcus opened his eyes, he was still in the computer core. But everything had changed. The interface unit had integrated completely with his nervous system, turning him into a hybrid of human consciousness and quantum technology. He could feel the thoughts of every person on the station, sense the quantum fluctuations that governed reality, and perceive truths about the universe that no purely biological mind could comprehend. Admiral HFY was the first to speak, her telepathic voice filled with a new kind of respect. The human designation was incorrect. You are not maintenance personnel. You are what the ancients called a reality guardian. Commander Thok approached with uncharacteristic humility, his warrior pride replaced by genuine awe. I have misjudged your species greatly, Marcus Chen. The Kraxan Empire owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid. Marcus looked around at the faces of beings who had dismissed humans as weak and primitive just hours before. Now they saw the truth, that humanity's greatest strength had never been physical power or advanced technology. It was the chaotic creativity that made them unpredictable, the stubborn hope that persisted against all logic, and the willingness to sacrifice everything to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The Reapers are gone from this sector, Marcus said, his voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. But there are other infected galaxies out there, other civilizations that need to be saved, and there are more interface units hidden on worlds throughout this galaxy, waiting for humans to find them. Through his enhanced perception, Marcus could see the future spreading out like branches on a tree. Humanity would no longer be dismissed as the weakest species in the galaxy. They would become its guardians, using their unique gifts to protect other civilizations from threats that conventional military force could never defeat. The age of human irrelevance was over. The age of human guardianship had begun. And Marcus Chen, the maintenance worker who had been ignored and dismissed by everyone around him, had become the first of a new kind of being, part human, part quantum consciousness, and completely dedicated to ensuring that no species would ever again face extinction at the hands of entities like the Reapers. The galaxy had finally learned what humans were truly capable of when the stakes were high enough, and it would never make the mistake of underestimating them again.